aren't the droids we're looking for.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's them! Blast them!
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Tactics Channel episode. Today, we're going to be talking about a new word that I think you've all used before, whether you've realized it or not, and that is staging. Staging to me is one of the biggest overall strategy changes from the old version of Legion to the one we currently have. So today, I'm actually going to take you guys to one of my tables and give you a sample size of what that actually looks like on the tabletop. But the main thing that I want to start us off with is understanding what staging actually is. Staging, for all purposes and intent, is preparing for the next round with a unit, model, strategy, or card. So overall, strategy-wise, all we're doing is we are playing the game in advance for something we haven't done yet. The most common way you're going to see this in this current version of Legion is turn one. You're going to see a lot of aggressive players that have short-range armies just move up into certain parts of the board so they can score objectives, score secondaries, dominate the board, and make really big plays. You've seen this a lot in the last version of Legion. Whether you've realized you've not done it, or maybe you have, regardless, you have experienced staging. You just may not have paid attention to it yet because it wasn't as important. A great example of something you may be more familiar with would be Boba Fett. Boba Fett used to, last game, play that 3-pip that gave everybody the extra black dice, move up, maybe have a range 3 shot on something, and then next turn play his 1-pip, give it to someone else, pop seize the initiative, extend his guns to range 3, and just delete a unit and run away. That was staging, whether we realized it or not. But with this current version of Legion, I see that on a much broader board state. It's very hard to do it with just one unit now and find success. So I think now more than ever, it's an important conversation to have with yourself and your friends if you're looking to get better at Legion. So come on over with me and we're gonna go to an actual table and look at what that looks like on the board. This simulation is not gonna be perfect. It's not where everyone's gonna make the greatest decisions. It's just a general ideology you can have going into your next game. Come on over. Hey guys, welcome back. This is the table that we're going to be using today. I'm just going to focus on the table and show you guys tactics-wise kind of some of the things that we're going to talk about. So pretty much all I've set up for the table is I have made sure to have a 3x3 version of a Star Wars Legion table so we can really just focus on one half of the board and really talk about in detail what this idea of staging means. So the scenario is we have Rebels versus Droids, as you can see here, and we're just going to kind of play through a scenario so I can show you some different thought processes we're going to have. The scenario is we're playing Bunker Assault, and this is going to be our half the board with the POI here and a POI here for our 2 bunkers. We have a Snail Droid, which is going to be carrying the Recon the Mission token, and Luke doing the same thing. So that's our scenario these 2 players have hypothetically developed into, and we're just gonna kind of go from a play-by-play scenario of what I would do in this situation to maximize this idea of staging, but also hopefully explain it in a way that you can understand. So we're gonna take these 2 guys off the table, and I'm going to show you quite literally every single action of a predetermined set of points that I'm going to be putting on the table and showing you today. We have an MK2 and a Rebel Veteran that have started us off in prepared positions. We're going to show you guys that now, but these guys are going to be already ready to go. Everything as such. So these Rebel Vets have deployed on my side of the table. They've got their dodges and everything else, preparing to line up against the Droid Menace. And as you can see, there's quite a different scenario in terms of this with just a 3x3, but hopefully I can show you guys. Now, believe it or not, setting up in prepared positions like this is absolutely part of staging. There's no question in my mind that this is a huge part of staging is just prepared positions. It's a very tough keyword, and with just one set of vets like this, it's going to cost me some information. My opponent's got plenty of stuff coming onto the table. We've started off the game, and he's got all these big pieces that could just show up and delete my vets. So my first thing with staging is simple. If anything happens before the game, which is literally just prepared positions from what I can remember off the top of my head, you're going to want to be careful. This MK2, I could care less about. He's very cheap, he's very squishy, He's helpful, but he's okay to get shot. These vets, as you can see, I have done my best to place behind this line of sight blocker. My opponent is going to have a much harder time running up and just shooting these guys. So I can pop out and shoot versus my opponent is going to have to find a very crazy angle to figure this out. So we're going to assume that both players have just played standing orders to keep it as simple as possible, but we're going to pretend the droid player won the roll-off. So looking at what I have left of my army, I don't have a ton over here that I want to just necessarily throw onto the board, but one safe bet that you can always start with staging-wise is your commanders, especially if you can put them in a place where they're going to be safe. So I'm going to take our wonderful boy Kalani, and I'm going to move him onto the table like so. Now, this is line of sight blocking right here, this piece of terrain. So Kalani is going to be able to be hidden from all of this vet stuff, and now he's come straight onto the table to be ready to support his droid allies. This is a primetime example of staging. I am going as early as I can with something that's going to support the rest of my army without it getting hurt. Kalani could literally stay here the rest of the game and just be a range 2 token generator. Next turn, he's likely going to move up and be contesting this objective, but otherwise, he's in a great spot and we're going to be done with him. As the rebel player, I can go to my bag or I can go with my vets. Our rebel player has pulled a special forces. So the next step in this scenario is we have some sleeper cells. And these sleeper cells are going to come onto the table in a way that I'm going to get as close as possible to my enemy while knowing that I'm going to be safe. This is staging when you have a range 2 or aggressive unit. I'm going to scout onto the table, and to maximize my abilities with the sleeper cells, I'm actually going to cohere with this first scout a unit to be contesting this objective at range 1, giving them a dodge. I'll do the same thing to move up like so, giving them another dodge. And then, lastly, I'm just going to tuck them up as aggressively as I can behind this giant line of sight blocker in the middle of the table. My goal here is very simple. I want these sleeper cells to come out next turn and blast something to pieces. But I also have to be careful in making sure that they themselves do not just get wiped off the board. Yes, they're going to have 3 dodges. Yes, maybe they could take a shot. But the whole idea of staging is we are minimizing what our opponent can do for us setting up for turn 2. So all of a sudden, my first activation, I have put a massive threat on the board in the middle of the table. And these guys are going to be able to do whatever they want and wreak havoc on the enemy. So with this being said, we now have these sleeper cells that are essentially going to really go after anything they want. So as you can see, I've kind of put them up in the middle of the board in the sense that my opponent is going to have to work for this objective. I now have a unit that is going to be able to pop out and shoot anything on this objective right here. So with this being said, I now have a really cool scenario where I've put a unit out of line of sight, but I can also pop out and destroy anything that's going to be on this objective. Sleeper cells are a fantastic unit, but their one weakness is they're so short-ranged. That's not a bad thing in this version of Legion, but I can't just, per se, walk them on my point and let them get shot by what's going to come. So our droid player has to go next. And with that being said, let's go ahead and flip back over to that. So it's back to the droid player after the sleeper cells have moved up to the middle of the board, capturing a good staging ground for round 2, staging a very strong round 2 response to whatever the droid player does. But the droid player has something up his sleeve. He thinks he can kill an MK2 early on, so he is going to move a snail droid onto the table. This snail droid has one of 2 things going on for it. Number 1, it cannot see these sleeper cells. So our rebel player has really done a good job to make sure that this does not affect him in terms of, hey, look, a building. The best cover in the game right now is to not be seen. So even though our snail droid has moved onto the table and is probably going to put this MK2 out of its misery, we have a very good situation for the rebel player, where for the most part, they're going to be willing to take that trade any day of the week versus this massively important unit of special forces that can also double down and score the bunker assault objective. Now droid is fired, MK2 comes off the table pretty easy. Classic scenario for our precious MK2s. With this being said though, as the rebel player, we're willing to make that trade and make things happen. The real issue is this snail droid is transporting a group of B2 battle droids. Now this droid player, once again, we're not focusing on them as much for our terms of staging. This player is going at the throat of our opponent. He's going in as crazily as he can to do what he wants and play the game as he pleases. So all of a sudden, we now have a B2 squad that has popped onto the table and threatens our good, well-hidden sleeper cell unit. So in other words, if we take a closer look, we can see that we have a new problem as our rebel player. We have these B2s that have essentially hopped out of the snail droid and have shown up in a way that if we don't do something next turn, they're going to come over and shoot our sleeper cells that have hidden behind the building. This is very, very bad as the rebel player because we've done everything we can to avoid this. So these B2s have come out to the middle of the table. But the secret behind all of this and what I want to teach you guys is this is a good thing for the rebel player. Isn't always going to happen like this, and it isn't always going to be perfect. Even if you stage and use your line of sight blockers and set up your MK2 where it's kind of just chump change, you're still going to have situations where your opponent is going to come at you. There's so many movement abilities like transport, Grievous letting these guys take a wound and move more, where nowhere you hide is safe. But we've created a scenario now that we can do something about it setting up for next round. All right, so the action continues, and we're now going to reap the benefits of our turn one decision to hide these vets. They've saved themselves from the snail tank's wrath. They've saved themselves from the B2's wrath, even if they did move. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to pop these guys out, and we are going to utilize their range 3 shot to punish this B2 player as much as we can. Now, I'm sure some of you are saying at this point, like, well, Colton, why would you even consider the staging? You essentially put some sleeper cells onto the table to get shot by B2s. The real thing here is that we've made it where the B2s had to come all the way up here to even have a chance to shoot these guys. And now we're going to try to reap the benefits of what is to come. So I went ahead and rolled dice in this scenario, and this is a perfect example of why we do this. The B2s have unfortunately rolled 4 blanks, and that is going to be 2 whole guys off as they did not have cover due to their aggressive tendencies. So because of these guys, they are now going to be missing some models in terms of firing back into our enemy unit. So yes, our vets are never going to one-shot B2s and they're super tanky, but we have to realize this thing called trades. This is the biggest thing to understand about staging is we are trying to trade cheaper units for more expensive units. And if I can get my opponent to be as crazy as this and bring out their B2s because they just really want to stop my sleeper cells, perfect. Now we can do stuff like this where our vets can start plinking away at a much more pricey unit and stronger unit of B2s. Okay, just for clarity, I went ahead and rolled for these guys as well. They have 3 dodges, one from scouting onto the table and range 1 of the objective, second move and third move, giving them 3 dodges. This is the roll the B2s made with the BCM. They missed 2, and then we have a couple in here with 3 hits and 2 crits, or rather a crit and no hit. Well, that was a hit, sorry. But dodging 3 of these and rolling 1 block has led it to where we're only going to lose 1 whole sleeper cell model. Now you may say, once again, staging wise, you let yourself get shot. That's what we're not trying to do. Fair enough. But we've put ourselves in such a good position that we've essentially put these B2s on their deathbed. The sleeper cells have expected to survive and have done so. And because of this, we now have almost a full unit of sleeper cells that have taken a shot and let a B2 unit already get down to half health. So now we get to reap the benefits of this decision from our opponent and our decision to hide our units and force them to come out in vulnerable places or in places they can't even shoot at these sleeper cells at all. So we're going to continue for a couple more activations and show you what round 2 is going to look like in just a second. All right, we can't insult our droid player this entire time, so the droid player is going to go next, and he has moved up into range 4 of those vets that have decided to finally come out. Now we're going to give the droid player some credit here because he has cohered all of his guys behind this wonderful line of sight blocker where the POI is. So because of this, he is only ever going to be able to lose 2 models from a lot of shots coming this way. This is a really good decision if you have a range 4 gun to just hide the rest of your models in a way to where you can only ever lose 2 B1s. And it's that more obnoxious when you're using cheap units like Vets or B1s to do this. But they've rolled a crit and a hit. The Vets will be using that dodge that we've gotten from prepared positions to get rid of the hit, and then we'll go over here and we'll roll their 1. Bada bing, bada boom. Rebel Hope is on the way with a block. So because of this, we have a suppression coming out, and the droid player is starting to regret this aggressive action, but our rebel player is going to continue to capitalize on these turn 1 decisions, staging for round 2. All right, so we're back to the rebel player, and this is pretty much the state of our board so far. It's looking pretty good for the rebel player due to the fact that we've essentially made the B2s come all the way out here to even get a shot off turn 1. Our Vets have capitalized from that idea of staging to pop out and shoot the B2s and neuter them down to 3 B2s. Our droid player must be given some credit as he is staging for the first round as well, as he has taken a little bit of a sniper shot while hiding the rest of his models, really not making it an appeasing target. Now, this is what we have left coming onto the table for both players. We've got Luke Skywalker, a Ion Spider Droid, and a Sleeper Cell. Because it's back to the rebel player, we have a tough choice, as staging really can come down to your last activations of a round. So we can either go with the Sleeper Cell or Luke in this scenario, and we have some tough decisions. These B2s have come up way too far, and we can punish them with either of those squads, which we're probably going to do so. So, and the real question becomes, what am I going to use for next round? What am I going to use to actually score the objective? Remember that Luke has the secondary and the Sleeper Cells don't. They also get a free scout move. So I have some tough choices to make, to say the least. This is where staging gets a little more difficult as the round progresses and you really start to see the state and the flow of the board. Now you have to make tough choices of who is going to go where and why. I am personally going to choose Luke in this scenario, and he is simply going to come up onto the table like so, and then he is going to shoot into those B2s with his Pierce gun. Pierce gun says, bye one of you B2s, we'll be seeing you later. Now the reason I did this is because I actually don't want to fully kill the B2s with these line of sight blocked units if Luke needs to score his secondary. Luke is in a position as well where he's at range 2 of this objective, meaning that he's going to be able to contest that next turn if I double move him. The droid player is going to go with the Spider Droid, and he has a very simple decision to make. He sees some units across the line, and he's got some good shots going along the way between Luke and the Rebel Vets. The main reason that we put Luke here, number 1, to keep the B2s honest, but we now have backup. So the droid player has a tough choice to make if he really wants to try to put wounds on Luke, or do you keep the onslaught onto the Rebel Vets? The droid player here has decided to go with Luke as he finds him a very scary target. So after the roll from the Ion Spider, Kalani has also shared his wonderful aim, once again talking about that staging ideology, utilizing it to make sure we get 4 hits on Luke. Luke is actually out of cover, but backup is going to remove 2 of these hits, meaning Luke is only going to be rolling for 2, which he's going to block both because Rebels obviously have great red saves. With this being said though, this was a great decision by a Rebel player because even if Luke takes a couple wounds here, I'm going to have all of my models and everything I need going into round 2. Droid player probably could have shot the Vets as well. Both wouldn't have been terrible decisions in this scenario, but regardless, the Ion Spider is in a good position to shoot down this alleyway and make this home objective for the Rebel player a threat. So it's not a bad decision by our droid player at all. Dice just be dice sometimes. All right, it's our last activation for the Rebel player and the entire game. We're gonna go into 1 activation in the next round, but we've pretty much set the stage for round 2. We've put our Sleeper Cells in a favorable position to pop out and shoot or just finish off these B2s. We put Luke in a way that we can contest the objective or contest the B2s and tie them up in melee. The vets have an easy speed 1 move onto the objective and shots on multiple targets that aren't line of sight blocked. But regardless, we have lots of tough decisions to make because at the end of the day, there's a giant snail tank sitting on my opponent's objective. I only have one unit to go with, and that is going to be these sleeper cells. They are going to do something very different than everything we've done because I have a very big time game plan for them. And their game plan is simple. Go, score, objective. All right, plan revealed. Sleeper cells have moved up 3 times, 1 with scout and then 2 double moves where the unit leader is right here, and the rest of them have cohered forward in a way to be line of sight blocked from all of these shooting units. So when you're looking at this, I know you may say, well, I wouldn't have put them there. I would have put them behind the building. I would have put them there. This is more just an example of what kind of thought process you can have going on in your head as you approach this idea of staging. The droid player has some options as well. So let's start with his. His is pretty straightforward. Play a 1-pip, hope to go first with his snail tank most likely, blast these rebel sleeper cells before they get more dodges, maybe even shoot Luke, or maybe even go with the B2s, get a shot off, and then get tied up in melee to make sure they don't die. Rebel player has a lot more options, and this is the main idea behind staging. Luke, once again, can double move, easily finish off these B2s. Sleeper cells can pop out, be in range 1 of the snail tank and hit it with impact grenades. These sleeper cells can actually do the same thing. Better yet, they can get contesting the objective, shoot Kalani, B1s, or Spider Droid. Luke has great options. Sleeper Cell 1 and 2 have great options. Heck, even these vets can move up and take shots at either of these 2 things any time in the round and still be valuable. So, take a second to look at the board and think about, if I were the Rebel player, you, as the viewer, which unit would you go with first? Just take a second to think about it. The biggest thing that I would say here is, even if you lose the 1-pip, even if the droid player goes first, and let's say he kills half of these sleeper cells, that's okay. Because we still have a unit that is going to be safe from most of this other stuff, to where it's going to have to move and shoot, or move and get up here and shoot. The rest of my army now has a chance. The Rebel player here is 110 points short on models on this side of the board, but we've already gained ourselves a very big lead by these B2s. So regardless of what happens next, both the droid player and the Rebel player have staged in ways to make round 2 theirs to win. Me personally, if I went into this scenario, I would actually go with the sleeper cells or Luke first. You might start with these as well to pop out and finish off the B2s before anything bad happens, but this snail tank is going to kill something. These dodges, unfortunately, would be gone as well, so it would very much so minimize the defensive properties of these sleeper cells. I would probably start off with these sleeper cells in particular to either pop out and shoot and get to this side of cover, or finish off these B2s and get another dodge. The good thing is, if we reposition our unit leader behind this POI, we'd actually get cover from the snail tank. Better yet, we can move this way and get out of his front arc to get impact, or better yet, just not have him shoot at us. So we can really use our maneuverability with these sleeper cells to do whatever we need to on this side of the board. Luke can go last and honestly not even swing at anything this turn, because he can double move and see the Spider Droid, the snail tank, or the B2s to score that secondary. That's easily our biggest thing with that. We can also force the droid player to go early with his tank, and if he doesn't move it, he's not going to have line of sight of these guys to score his secondary, and he doesn't have range of anyone else to score it as well. So we've put him in a predicament where, yeah, you can kill these guys, but you're going to be 1 point short of the game, and that's a really tough decision to make and put our opponent in. Essentially, all we're doing here with staging is we're giving the droid player as many bad choices as possible, while as the Rebel player, I have as many good choices as possible. And you know what? Even if we do it perfectly like this and we set up the greatest scenario ever and everything works out for our wonderful Rebel player, DICE can still make this hard. So understand to play with the flow of the game. but this is mostly how you stage, especially with these short range units, to just get up close and line of sight blockers and set up for round 2 where you can pop out, kill, pop out, kill, pop up, score, kill. Droid player still has options as well. He's got a nice shooting range, but for the most part, this is Legion 2.0 is getting ready for round 2 because it is almost always a bloodbath. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video today. Really just wanted you guys to get to see a visual representation of what I mean by staging. Some quick summary points before we leave at the end of this is number 1, staging is normally a round 1 going into round 2 concept. It can happen in other rounds, but for the most part, this is the main time that you're gonna see it. Number 2, it did exist in Old Legion and you've probably been doing it for a while, but now it's more important and more vast when it comes to the game as a whole than it's ever been. And my last point is, it's not necessarily always going to work out. That scenario is absolutely just imaginative ideas and everything in between. Doesn't matter if a Rebel player makes all the right decisions, he may still lose. The biggest thing is getting you in the mindset of where you're thinking ahead of what you're going to do with certain units. And if you can plan in advance by positioning your units in good ways and staging them for the next round, you are going to find success. So, as always, good luck, have fun.